an option either. As she told me many times, she'd done enough of that during her military service. For her, being labeled a backbencher for the rest of her congressional career was tantamount to a political death sentence. Behind me, a deep voice said, "I agree with Kit. Let's stay the course." I turned around to face my immediate supervisor, Dan, the chief of staff. A few years younger than me, Dan was a nice guy who meant well. Unfortunately, the kind words ended there. He came to Washington with Maeve and knew her congressional district like the back of his hand, but he understood almost nothing about policy and Congress. It was a constant battle to educate him about how politicians operated and the distinct culture of Capitol Hill. I was a newbie to the House of Representatives, but at least I knew how a bill became a law. Dan struggled with the most basic schoolhouse rock version of events. Dan looked as if his brain had been wiped clean. His eyes were round with panic. He hadn't bargained for a government shutdown when he left North Carolina for Washington. He moved closer so that Maeve couldn't hear his whispered question. "What should we do next?" "Dan, doesn't it make sense to issue the press release?" I used my regular speaking voice. Maeve should know her top 8 had no clue about handling a political crisis. "Right. I'll make sure that gets done." He sped down the hallway toward his small private office. I hoped he knew how to email the release to our important press contacts, but I had my doubts. Yesterday, I overheard him ask his iPhone, "Siri, what is a government shutdown?" I pretended I hadn't overheard. Ignorance is bliss, especially in Washington, D.C. All staffers in the Dixon office were working tonight, but tomorrow would be an entirely different story. A government shutdown meant no money was available to keep government programs or buildings operational. That included paying government employees. Each member of Congress had to determine how to keep his or her office functional during the shutdown. Maeve decided that Dan and I would report for work. Everyone else would remain at home, unless absolutely needed. Despite the winter darkness, that meant long workdays were ahead, unless Congress resolved the dispute over government funding levels quickly. With deeply entrenched views on both sides of the aisle, it was unlikely that this fiasco would be short-lived. My desk phone buzzed. Recognizing my live-in boyfriend's cell number, I answered it. "You're still at work?" "Good evening to you, Doug. Happy government shutdown." "Sorry," he muttered. "I wanted to check because I'm headed to bed soon. Are you going to stay there all night?" "No, I'm going to leave as soon as Maeve decides to call it a day. I'll see you soon." "Okay, great. Bye." A click was followed by a dial tone. The conversation with Doug was par for the course, lately at least. I'd been at my job with Maeve for 6 months now. Working for a newly elected freshman member of Congress had proven more time-consuming than my previous position with elder statesman Senator Lyndon Langsford. After my former boss's murder, which I helped the police solve, I interviewed for numerous jobs in Congress. My best friend Meg had accepted a job working in the House of Representatives. When the opportunity to work as a senior legislative staffer for Maeve presented itself, I eagerly applied. I'd anticipated a steep learning curve. After all, the House and the Senate function as separate political institutions with totally disparate traditions and norms. What I had not anticipated was how much work it was to staff a member of Congress who was just starting her political career rather than approaching the end of it. As a military veteran with no track record, she had to consider every vote she made and position she took with the utmost care. Her constituents in North Carolina were watching her every move. She represented a swing district, which meant her seat frequently changed hands between the two political parties due to the evenly divided voting electorate who resided there. Doug hadn't quite adjusted to my new 24/7 responsibilities. He was a history professor at Georgetown, and between my work and his attempts to finish yet another book, our recent time together had been limited to hastily shared late-night dinners or abbreviated stilted phone calls. His increasing detachment should have been causing me considerable concern, but this wasn't the time to focus on it. I glanced at my email inbox. The messages were already piling up. There were several from top staff in the Speaker's office. Maeve couldn't ignore those emails.